Honored to bring on the program. You might recognize his last name. Heck, you recognize his voice, too. The radio show for an awfully long time on this very station. Michael Reagan is with us on the program. Michael, good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate taking some time out of the morning this morning. As I mentioned, State Senator Tim Bivins is sitting alongside. He represents the great city of Dixon.
Well, there you go. What a great city that is. I hear great people are born there and great people still live there.
More than a couple.
Well, we get you on a Thursday before Independence Day. It's my favorite holiday of the year to celebrate America. And a nice little poll out yesterday, I'm sure that you saw from Quinnipiac, rating the best presidents since World War II. And a gentleman named Ronald Reagan, far and away, named the best president since World War II by voters. I'd say they got it right.
Oh, I think they probably got it right on both sides.
Yeah,
to be honest with you. I think they got it absolutely right. And it's nice that people feel that way. But it doesn't mean our work isn't done, that we really have to educate America on who he was, what he accomplished, and what it was like in America back during the 1980s.
And that's part of what you do, the Reagan Legacy Foundation. You're the president of the Reagan Legacy Foundation. What is that all about, the Reagan Legacy Foundation?
Well, it carries on the legacy of my father, basically worldwide. We support the men and women who serve on the USS Ronald Reagan by providing scholarships to them on a regular basis. In 2009, we opened up a Ronald Reagan exhibit at the Checkpoint Charlie Museum in Berlin. And 3,000 people a day go through that museum and now learn about my father. Last year, we were able to get an imprint put in the ground, about 3 foot by 4 foot imprint in the ground in front of the Brandenburg Gate, commemorating his speech that he gave in 1987. We worked with the Poles to have a statue of my father and Pope John Paul in Gdansk, Poland, a bronze statue. And just recently, we opened up the Ronald Reagan Theater and a film that we produced called Reagan at Normandy, that we opened up at St. Mary Glees, Normandy, on June 5th, the day before D-Day. And now that will play on a regular basis there at St. Mary Glees at their museum there. And next year we're opening up the Ronald Reagan Freedom Conference Center there at St. Mary Glees to speak about freedom. So this is kind of what we do. Along with that, I speak around the world on his legacy and the importance of it.
ReaganLegacyFoundation.org is the website. Michael Reagan with us here on WROK. And, you know, we got the unemployment numbers this morning at 6.1%. And I was saying, I don't know if anyone really buys that. It doesn't feel right, like we're at 6.1% unemployment. And people are still kind of down. And I think the economy's not bounced back yet. And I think back to the way we felt about ourselves, the way we felt about our country when your dad was president. And we needed an injection of that, I think, almost more than anything in this country today.
Well, when I go out and speak to Republican groups and what have you, I say, my father passed away 10 years ago. And when he passed away, America really lost her cheerleader. And we don't have a cheerleader right now on either side. Mm-hmm. No cheerleader out there. There's nobody out there uplifting America and really speaking about America's greatness. And that's what's really sad. And so you have people who are angry, mad, upset because there's nothing to point towards. There's no goal, if you will. The goal is, can I get a job today? Am I going to be able to make ends meet? I'm going to be able to make my payments. But there's no goal of really feeling better about yourself, the country you live in, what this nation means to the world. I mean, when I was in Normandy a couple of weeks ago, and the Reagan Legacy Foundation, by the way, we helped underwrite 14 D-Day vets to be able to go back and be at Normandy for the 70th anniversary. And you go there and you see that generation and the pride and the humbleness of that generation. And you see the French in these towns just absolutely coming out to say thank you to America. But you don't hear that, in our news blocks. Mm-hmm. You don't see that in our leadership. What you do is you see blame America, and that's sad.
Michael Reagan with us here on WROK. It's Ronnie and Scott, State Senator Tim Bivins alongside. Michael, you talk about America's role in the world, and we see the foreign policy debacle that is playing out around the world, whether it be Ukraine, Russia, Middle East, Iraq. What goes through your mind as you watch as the President and John Kerry, as Secretary of State, try to handle these situations?
Well, it saddens me. I was in Poland with the Polish president November 11th of 2009. This 2 days after we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the fall of the wall, and I was a guest of the president of Poland. The president of the United States sent nobody to Poland to represent America as Poland's celebrating the 20th anniversary of freedom. Mm-hmm. And so I was there as a guest. I wasn't there officially. And I had breakfast with the president. This is the president, and everybody I had breakfast with that morning died in a horrific plane crash a few months later. But I remember the president looking at me. The first thing he said to me after he said good morning to me through his interpreter was, he said, "Why did your president take away our missile defense?" Mm-hmm. That was his first question to me. And it really concerned him. And I said to him then, I said, I don't think I'm the right person to ask. But if I were you, I would ask Vladimir Putin, because I think he is the right person to ask. And I was right when I said that to him. And later that afternoon, the Czech ambassador to Poland, who was also at the events of the day, found me at the event and talked to me and said the same to me. Why did your president take away our missile defense? We have a president who doesn't believe we should have friends in the world that we live in. Mm-hmm. And Ronald Reagan made friends out of our enemies. This man is making enemies out of former friends of America. But friendship starts at respect. And when there is no respect for your leadership, you're never going to get to the next level. And this is what we're facing. And I honestly don't think John Kerry and Obama can fix it, because they don't have it in their gene pool to know how to do it.
Excuse me, Mike, Tim Bivins, Ronald Reagan, everybody wants to be Ronald Reagan. Every politician you see wants to be Ronald Reagan. And what I've always told people is, I think the thing that people miss about Ronald Reagan was his sincerity, and the other thing was his great faith. And I was reading a book. It's called The Faith of Ronald Reagan, Mary Beth Brown. And in the book, there's a story, if you recall it, that you were on the Air Force One with your dad, with the president, and he was doing something, some counting. Do you recall it? Can you share that story?
Oh, I told the story. My dad was actually a Good Friday of 1988. I hitched a ride back to California. I was in Washington, D.C., spent the night at the White House. That's kind of nice when you say, well, I hitched a ride back on Air Force One. And as we landed at Point Magoo, my dad counted out the number 9 on his fingers. And I just looked at him and I said, what is significant about the number 9? He said, 9 more months, I'll no longer be president. And I said, are you looking forward to that? He said, yes, I am. I said, why? He says, because in 9 more months, I can begin again to go back to church on a regular basis on Sunday morning. I haven't been doing that ever since I looked out the window of that limousine pulling away from the Hilton Hotel back in 1981 and saw people laying in their own blood because the bullets meant for me, and I haven't wanted to put anybody else in harm's way. So I haven't been going to church, and I'm looking forward to not being present so I can once again go to church on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, and it seems...
Now, what's interesting, what's interesting about that, I tell that story here a few years ago, and the Secret Service agent in charge of the ranch at the time, who still does a lot of stuff with the ranch, he's in the audience. I tell that story. And he walks up to me afterwards, and John walks up, he says, you're the guy, doing that, the guy. He says, your father went to church that Sunday morning. Huh. I said, really? He says, yeah. He wasn't on the schedule to go to church, but he called us on the rain down when he woke up and said, I want to go to church. And so we brought in the chopper, and we took him down to church in Santa Ynez that Sunday morning.
That's, as I said, I think that's just something that's totally missed with your father. And
well, I think too, sir. But it all started where you represent. It all starts in Dixon. It all starts in Tampico. And if you go through his Tampico home, you go through his Dixon home, and you walk through the ranch house, there is absolutely no difference. It is humble. The humility shines all over the building. He never forgot his roots. And when I tell politicians today, when they'll listen to me, instead of the consultants I listen to, I said, my father spoke to us in parables. And if you really think about it, when you listen to one of his next speech, and because this is the 50th anniversary of the Time for Choosing speech coming up October 27th, you listen to it. Ronald Reagan spoke to us in parables. Today's politicians, too many of them, speak to us in sound bites. And the difference is a parable comes from inside you. A sound bite comes from a consultant.
Exactly. You know, he came back. I was in law enforcement for 30 years in Dixon, Lee County, and he came back 4 times during my career, and had the privilege of running security details every time. The last time he came back was 1990, and he was out of the presidency, and he spent the entire day, and we got to follow him around all day long. And I saw just what you said. He was no different whether it was you and him or whether there was thousands in cameras. He was the same person. And again, I think that's what people miss. Now, there's something that I did observe. I wanted to see if you observed this or observed this too. There was a gentleman in a private setting, a few people, and your dad was signing autographs, signing a book. And it was an old classmate of his, and he gave him 1 book. He signed it. He gave him 2 books. On the 3rd book, your dad looked at him and says, "How many?" He says, "How many do you have?" And he had like 13 books, and he said, "All of them?" And he said, "Yeah." And he very graciously proceeded to sign them. But right before that, he stuck 2 fingers in the left side of his collar and pulled on his collar. And I saw that again later that night. He had gone to the motel, and I'm sure he was out of his suit, and another gentleman showed up who was a former delegate, and more or less insisted to have a photograph taken with your dad. And so he very graciously put his suit back on, came out, and I've got a great picture of him talking to this individual, and your dad's got 2 fingers in his collar, pulling his collar. I just wondered if you ever noticed that?
No, but what that tells you about him is the fact that there's not a person, you're included, there's not a person that he didn't come in contact with that did not believe at that moment of contact with him, you were his best friend.
Yeah.
You were his best friend. You know, when he walked into a room, you had to pull him out with a crowbar. He didn't want to leave the room. He enjoyed being with you. And when he spoke to you, he wasn't looking past you to the next person. He wasn't looking at the door, when do I leave? He was spending his 100% of him was in that conversation, with you. And you can't teach that to people. Mm-hmm. You can't teach it. I think one of the other stories I tell about my father, which is probably the one that really it tells him. This is when he's running to get the nomination back in 1976, and he's in the Carolinas campaigning, and there's a family, there's a school there represented by blind children, young children, 12, 13, 10, 11, 12, 13. And there's not many of them. There's 6 or 8. And after he gets done speaking, the head of the school goes up to Mike Deaver and says, would the governor spend a few moments answering questions of these kids? And my dad overhears that. And he says to Mike, Mike, let's go in the trailer. I don't want people to think that I'm speaking to blind children trying to garner votes here in the Carolinas. Mm-hmm. So they all go into a trailer. And so now they're asking my father questions, my father's answer. And he gets maybe to the 2nd or 3rd answer. All of a sudden, he stops. And what do you think he does? His mind's clicking. He's thinking to himself, they can't see me. They can only hear my answers, but they can't see my facial expressions. Mm-hmm. So he takes a step forward, and he takes his face, and he lays it amongst the children. And he invites the children, as they ask him questions, to lay their hands on his face so they can now not only hear the answer, but they can now see the answer. Who does that?
Yeah. Michael.
That's inside of you. And it goes back, Senator, to what you said, your faith and who you are.
Michael Reagan with us here. Just a couple more minutes here, if we can, with Michael Reagan, Riley, and Scott on WROK. You mentioned children, and I know one of the issues very near and dear to your heart. You give speeches all around the country, and one of the topics that you talk about a lot is preventing child abuse. And you tell your story, which I'm sure is not easy to do. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, at 8 years of age, I was my mother put me in an after-school program at a local school, and the man who ran it was a pedophile. And so during my third grade, 8 years old, he spent most all that year sexually abusing me, and at the end of the year, by then had taken me up to Santa Monica Mountains and had me undressed and had me and took photographs of me, and a few days later would take me back to his apartment and literally have me, unbeknownst, I didn't know what I was doing, but he would take my hand, put tongs in my hand with a piece of paper and move it from one pan to a second pan to a third pan, and what would come up would be a nude picture of me. And he said, "Wouldn't your mother like to have a copy?" And at that point, my life literally ended. There's a book out called Twice Adopted.
Mm-hmm.
You can go on Amazon and get it. And my life ended. So when my dad ran for governor, I knew the photographs were there. When he ran for president, I knew the photographs were out there. Scared me to death. Considered suicide and everything else, if you will, because of that. And didn't tell my father until April 12th, 1987, up at the ranch when my first book was coming out. And so that's where my heart is. I do the politics because my last name is Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
But my heart is really working with children. I have the Mike Reagan Center in Texas where I deal with foster care, adoption, child abuse. We also, through Arrow Family Ministries, we're housing 14 girls who are able to get out of human sex trafficking right now. And so I work with Aaron when I can, make calls for Aaron when I can, see that Aaron's law is instituted in different states across this country, that so we can start teaching our children what they need to do and where they need to go, and if they can talk, and so on and so forth. I'm actually also working with Boz Division. Boz is Billy Graham's grandson, who is a lawyer and works now, teaches law at Liberty University, and we're working on a curriculum with Pepperdine University to start instituting a curriculum at the college level, so that those who are going to be working in the children's areas of life in their livelihoods will be able to, recognize and work with these kids. Because what happens too often is we look at these issues through the eyes of the adult. We forget to look at through the eyes of the child. And the eyes of the child are much different than the eyes of an adult. And it all starts, to be honest with you, tonight. Between 20 and 30 million children will go to bed in America without a father in the home. Mm-hmm. That's outrageous. And that's where it begins. There's 400,000 kids who are taken out of their homes every year because of neglect and abuse in America. There's 100,000 children who have already been recruited into human sex trafficking. There's 300,000 on the cusp. It's a $9.5 billion industry in the United States of America. And Washington has not delivered one dime or $1 or one bed to an American child who's been recruited into human sex trafficking. And just for families out there, if your child runs away from home, you've got 48 hours to get them back, because within 48 hours, they are recruited into human sex trafficking. It's what's going on in this country is it's unconscionable.
State Senator Tim Bivins, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, you were chief sponsor of Aaron's Law here in Illinois, right?
Yes.
I was, and we have our mutual friend, Aaron, and she's now got that law passed in 19 states, and another 18 or so are considering it. And Mike, so she just gave birth a couple nights ago. So
is that right?
She did, first child.
Wow. And people need to say, the moment of giving birth is wonderful. People need to understand, for her to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, because I still deal with self-esteem to this day. You never do not. I mean, you never get over what happened to you as a child. You compartmentalize it, and what have you. But it is the most horrific thing that can happen to a child. So to get to the point that that she gave birth, I mean, the fact that I'm saved because I have a great Christian wife. I mean, Colleen was married 39 years, and she's put up with me, and hadn't been for her, I don't know where I would be. But thank God for her, coming into my life and what have you. But it's not easy. It's not easy. So I do whatever I can to try and help Aaron and others and Boz and education and go out to speak, because the damage, when you consider when a pastor gets up on Sunday morning and speaks to his congregation, about 20% of the congregation has either gone through it or is going through it today in the world that we live in, and it's not getting better. It's getting progressively worse.
Michael Reagan with us. You can follow him on Twitter. You're active there at Reagan World. We really appreciate your generous time this morning for us and all your insight and sharing your story, too. Thanks so much for the time this morning, Michael.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you also. It's been a great morning, and anytime.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. There's Michael Reagan with us.